Hey everyone, this is Deepak Anchala with the second episode of our podcast Adopted. And with me today, I have a very special guest, someone I've known for quite a while now. We worked, 3 years somewhere together in 6sense, close to?
We had some fun for 3 years. Yeah, that's right.
I know. So Amar, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, both professionally and personally, and what got you here?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I've known Deepak, for 3 years. Currently, I work at 6sense, SVP of Product. I've been at 6sense, which is a company that's in, predictive marketing analytics, rev tech platforms. I've been there for about a decade. Prior to that, done various different roles, consulting, corporate strategy, product marketing, product management at different companies. Some you might know, VeriSign, Symantec, Proofpoint. So yeah, it's been a fun journey, and I'm happy to go and talk about anything in that. Personally, come from a middle-class family. I was born in the US, but my family moved to India in the late 80s. Did a lot of my schooling in India. I did my engineering college in India for my undergrad, and then came out here back to the US, pursued some more education, and then kind of decided to pursue first engineering as an option. And very quickly realized that, while I love engineering and I love creating things and building things, my first job as an engineer was working in an anechoic chamber. So it's a room, copper coated, no windows, one door, mostly like electrical equipment. And my personality I don't think it could be contained in that room. So that's kind of what took me on this journey after that.
Is that how you got into product management after engineering?
Actually, my first job after engineering was consulting. And I took a job which was in telecom consulting, so still close to what I really cared about at the time, wireless telecommunications. And it was working with many different companies, looking at their products and go-to-market strategies and looking at capabilities, and in some cases trying to modularize technology at the time. So it was a very different way of applying my engineering and technical skill, but more on the business path. For those who know, I'm Gujarati by background, so business was in the blood. So at some point, I think I was going to go down the business path.
It had to happen. But that's pretty awesome. Like I think what's unique about your background is you studied in two geographies, US and India, and I think you worked majorly in the US, but you started off as an engineer, worked in marketing, corporate strategy, and then been in product management ever since, right?
Yeah, that's right. And you learn so many things, right, as you go along. I've been in telecom, info security, now, sales and marketing tech, and every space is so different, but it's always exciting puzzle to solve. That's why I do what I do. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So tell me what you learned, Amar, in corporate development and strategy that you used when you were acquiring Strintel at 6sense.
Well, I will say one of the number one things that, I've learned over the years, even through corporate strategy, of course, but just product management in general, building products, especially in B2B SaaS, it's a hard job, right? There's lots of people want different things, lots of capabilities that you can focus on. Sometimes it's not what you build, it's what you don't build. And when we started approaching the market and thinking about, okay, what do we want to do at 6sense to serve the needs of our sellers and sales personas, it became very clear that we are doing a really fantastic job where it comes to analytics and putting data together and activating workflows. But it was all being done at the account level, the company level. Okay. And we really need to start thinking about, what do we do at the person level? How can we close that last mile? And so as we looked at Splintel and bringing the companies together, number one, right? Your team, Rahul, it was just, how do we get people that can work through these tough problems with us? Because life is too difficult and complex already in B2B SaaS. And if you're not working with people that have the same ethics, the same work culture, the same orientation, it becomes hard in terms of winning and putting things together. And number two, it was Splintel was doing really well. You had already shown a lot of market success, penetration, 300 plus customers. There's a lot of growth. So we knew we were onto something special. And, 3 years later, we actually have shown that. And you and I have a lot of great stories to tell of that joint experience. But I think it was a match. It was a good match. And continues to pay a dividend.
Glad it worked out at the end. Otherwise, it would have been a completely different story that we'll be talking about right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. So, Amar, going back to your early days in 6sense, were you employee number 8, or I forget, what was your employee number that time?
Yeah, I was the first product manager, product leader here, and I think I was the 15th person, I think, or somewhere in the top 20 when I joined the company, and Yeah, when I joined, the primary reason for me being a part of the company was great tech applied to like individual customers in different ways, a little bit more bespoke. And so the challenge at the time was, okay, how can we come up with something that's more of a SaaS service, can be built and sold to many customers and can scale up? And that was kind of the reason for the time when I joined 6sense and started.
Interesting. And that was probably pre-revenue, right? When you joined them?
Yeah, we had probably 10 customers. These customers came from a lot of the relationships that our, founders had and from their previous roles and previous jobs where people were taking a chance. And, those are the customers you love because they're at the cutting edge and they really care and they see the transformation. They know maybe not everything is possible, but they're willing to cut you a check and get you started and walk that journey with you. And that's kind of where we were. We had very little revenue, some $5 million. And that also went through a whole journey, 5 million to close to zero to back up to where we are now. So I think it's the life and times of any SaaS, B2B SaaS company. You go through all these motions as you iterate and you really refine what it is your product market fit might be.
I'd say very few SaaS companies get to product market fit. And the ones that do find it very difficult to scale to 5 million, 10 million ARR. And then going to 100 million is a completely different journey. And then I think I'm just quoting numbers that are public, but 6sense announced that we were over 200 million ARR right now. So you've seen the whole journey, right? So what are some of the learnings you can share about it, like in general, like if SaaS entrepreneurs were to build products, what are some of the things they need to be prepared for at different points in time?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. As I think about that question, there's definitely like these different phases when you're building a company and scaling the revenue. I think in the early days, we had the benefit that there was a really great idea from the very beginning of the company. So the idea, ideas are dime a dozen. It's really about the execution at the end of the day, but it does help to have a great idea to start with as a starting point. And I think what we found and what stayed true over the decade that we've been, core idea and the concept has stayed continuous. We've just built around it. We've built more around it. And so I think number one is, not to have pride in the early days about what you're building and be really, really open for people to give you feedback. I mean, we got so much feedback in the beginning where it's like, oh, this is great. You're doing all these predictive analytics and it's so complex, but hey, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know where I take this data and how do I activate it. And, you don't have really a software. You're just putting these scores together and you're pushing it into my CRM. And now I'm left to my devices to figure out what to do. And that was hard. It was hard to hear in the beginning for us. And, we had to listen and say, okay, yeah, we're doing a lot of complex things, understanding data, doing data pipelines, TL work, connecting all this data together. Machine learning at the time, 10 years ago, doing time series type of analysis and the predictive AI that we were doing at the time, there's nobody doing that in our market. So it was cutting edge, but still we had to go back and say, yeah, but if you boil it back down to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we weren't yet helping the customer achieve their outcomes. And so at every phase of the company, I think we've asked this question, which is, what's the outcome? What is the outcome we want as a company? What's the outcome that the customer wants? And over time, we've catered to different personas. We've added a lot more products to the mix. Most of our products became not analytics products, but actually workflows and activation products, right? So we quickly realized that it's not good enough to tell somebody, hey, here's a report of what you need to know about your data. It's like, well, you need to go do something about it. And so I think over time, where we've gone from a product development organization is, everybody might say, build products and features that people love, but it's never love at first sight, right? You're never going to build a product which in first shot, everybody says this is mind blowing. It's very rare for that to happen. So it's really about refinement. And we were refining and doing features at a much, much faster pace in the early days, where you're really trying to add a lot of capabilities, the breadth, especially in B2B enterprise, that's very important, right? Kinds of things that people ask you to build before they're willing to implement you inside their infrastructure, to now where, hey, you're more mature, you have a lot more companies. Companies don't like too much change too fast. They are doing training and education and enabling their teams. And so they want improvements. They want features, they want new things, but the pace has to be a little bit more controlled, more thoughtful, how you introduce new capabilities. And so I think at every step of this curve, as you're looking at product, as you're looking at go-to-market motions, pricing and packaging, how do you make it easy for people to make decisions of what to buy? How do you also not create a monolith where somebody has to buy everything? You actually do give them some choice. I think all these things are very important as you get through the journey to come together.
It's awesome. I mean, so many learnings along the way, right? Like, I think you started off by saying build products that people love. So a lot of people say you build painkillers, not vitamins. I think it starts there. But to get a product that people love also takes time, like in the product world, right? And there's so much competition. You have to identify white spaces. You have to build something. And I think you covered a little bit of this. Once you build a product, that it's not just about building, you have to go sell, distribute it. And at some point, you have to transition from being a single product company to a multi-product company, right? And that is hard, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree? And getting training go-to-market teams to go and sell all of that and pricing, packaging. And then at least my view in 6sense too was once you have multi-products, then how do you stitch all the products together? And how do you create all those individual motions, upsell versus cross-sell versus standalone motions? That becomes like a entirely different problem to solve, right?
100%. I mean, there's the product side, like you rightly said, how do you create and move to a multi-product company? Of course, if there's a need for it, right? If you're doing it in reaction to what the market's asking you for. And our market took us there where it wasn't just about marketing. We had to cater into sales and, connect the bridge between the two teams. And then it became operations at the table as well. And so let's build products that operations needs so that all the GTM players can work together on a platform. So we were kind of taken there by the market, by our customers. But as we're doing that from a product standpoint, we're doing acquisitions, right? We acquired a bunch of companies like Slintel, and we had to merge them together and make the experience better. And that takes effort, that takes time. But you're right, there's a whole other side of that coin, which is how do you get your sellers and your GTM teams who they have a tried and true playbook. They have a product they know how to sell. We're winning. Like every deal they go into, they know exactly what to say. They have all the battle cards. And then all of a sudden there's a new product and a new persona that needs to use it and a new buyer that may be at the table to buy that product. Different kinds of objection handling, different kinds of competitors, different pricing, like marketing buys based on database size. Sale typically buys based on number of user licenses. So there, there's differences that you have to work through. So I think that takes time, and it's not just on any one team. Product has a pretty big role to play in it. But I think that's kind of why when I hire and I look for product managers too, you want product managers that think not just about the product and the technology and the capability and the customer need, but the end to end. Okay, what is it going to take for a customer to learn? What is it going to take for our sellers and our teams to support? I think that holistic approach is very important when you move to being a multi-product company.
Interesting. And while you were building products throughout this journey, I'm sure like there would have been a lot of instances where you have been trying to figure out, hey, how do I improve adoption? I've launched something, I need to improve adoption. What do I do here? Could you talk through like maybe even during the build phase and not just post-launch, but how do you think of that? And what are some specific strategies you have used to improve product adoption?
Yeah, it's very timely, right? With the podcast adopted. It's a tough question to answer in that the stats, I think, show that 10% of features that are built in any product typically get used. Like that's the reality for B2B SaaS, right? We tend to build a lot of capabilities when we're building these complex enterprise software. And you might say that, well, some of that's driven because of compliance. Some of it's because of security needs. Some of it is just, hey, different customers of different flavors and different verticals have very different needs, and you're going to have to go do that. So it is justified many times to build all these capabilities. But the problem, of course, is that adoption does tend to be low. And there are things that you can do for this, right? So at our company, we chose Pendo. We chose Pendo to get a lot of product analytics out, to understand what's going on with adoption. We use Pendo guides. That was the kind of reason, like, can we get an understanding of what's going on and then have engagements that highlight things for customers, for users to say, okay, here's something that you haven't used. It's been a couple months, you haven't updated, or hey, here's a new feature that you should try to use that we've just introduced. Like all those things are great, right? It helps the user in-app, in motion while they're doing something. The other thing that we've tried to do is a lot of times features don't get used because there's this kind of friction, right? The speed bump. People don't want to learn sometimes. Like the next new feature, oh man, I got to go understand all the nuances of this feature and how to use it and what does it do, and maybe I got to go get permission from my manager to be able to take these actions. And so I think there's always that it's like when you buy a new device. I remember I buy a new device and I'd be so excited to unpack it and take out the device and read the manual and start using it. And these days, like you give me a new device, it's probably lying on my desk for like a couple of weeks before I'm ready to like open and start to like really explore it. And so I think it's an information overload, right? There's just too many apps, too many features, too many things that are taking our time, interrupt driven. And so what we've tried to do as a company is say, okay, well, how can we maybe give knowledge to the user in the application, in an easier way? So we've tried to do things like, AI driven knowledge base where somebody can ask a question. We try to maybe answer that and comb through our 6sense knowledge base. So we've tried to build that out. Other things that we've done is, it's people, process, and technology. And I think people have a very big role to play. So we have a customer success team at 6sense. We've also got strategic services. We've got adoption consulting. So you use a tribe, right? You use a number of people as well that can ultimately help the customer as you're trying to get them to do more with your product.
Yeah. I think the nuance here is that every customer has different use cases, or many of them do. And there's only one or two hero use cases that most people have. And
That's right.
when they see like all the features out there, they start getting like that cognitive overload. And they really have to figure out like what to use, what not to use. That is pretty interesting. Can we transition a little bit from in general product adoption to AI now? And that's the trend right now, right? With generative AI. We're hearing a lot about agents, AI teammates, AI in applications. So maybe let's start with Amar. What are you seeing in the world of AI with respect to your industry? And have you encountered like any products that like are offering AI solutions, or has 6sense themselves, like have they used AI anywhere? Can you talk
Yeah,
about?
I mean, leading question in some ways. You know the inside story for us at 6sense. So I think that Gen AI, of course, has recently made AI so popular, and we're seeing the frenzy in the market, right? Because people see the promise of what's possible. But if I were to rewind a little bit and go back to where at least 6sense started, a lot of it was around time series data, behavioral data, and predicting, right? Predicting who's in market to buy. So that's kind of predictive AI. From that, we went into, okay, we're getting the prediction, but we're using all these ensemble models, but we don't really understand what's going on. So then it kind of became, descriptive. How do we actually explain to a user what's happening with these models? What's the data feeding into these models? Then it became, okay, well, now you've told me what's going on with the models. You've told me, some of the insights you're predicting, but can you tell me what I should do next? So then it became more like prescriptive, right? How do you actually prescribe of all the things that sellers and marketers and ops people can do? What should they do? So prescriptive AI for what it's worth, right? And now, of course, okay, you told me what to go do. Can you help me with content and context and other things that I can use to then go and engage? And that's generative AI, where we're kind of seeing this most recent flurry. So I feel like AI in general, like when you think about our market, and by our market, I mean like RevTech, CRM, marketing automation, like all these sales, marketing, GTM tech, I think we're just going to see a explosion. It's one of the first use cases, I think, that's going to be very successful, have, a massive market penetration, have a lot of usage. The concepts, the goals, the outcomes that people expect are pretty clear. A lot of stuff has already happened in this market, right? Where we're seeing a bunch of companies, Salesforce has Salesforce Einstein. We've seen HubSpot come out with their agent AI. Like there's a lot of stuff that's happening. And so, I think the piece we have to remember though is when we get so excited about generative AI, I don't think generative AI by itself is earth-shattering for this market. I think it's definitely going to enhance all what we do. But I kind of view AI as these were outcomes we wanted to achieve. Some of them we were not able to achieve before, but with computational power, with all these predictive modeling techniques, with generative AI techniques, now we're able to achieve these outcomes, and maybe we're able to achieve them more efficiently in a better way with less effort, less time. So that's kind of the way I view a lot of the capabilities. An example I can give you is generating pipeline, right? Generating pipeline and having your BDRs, use Slintel and now 6sense and getting phone numbers and emails and emailing and calling. That's effort. What can generative AI, what can predictive AI do to make it simpler? Well, predictive is saying, don't focus on the 1,000 accounts. Focus on the 10 accounts today that you should prospect into because they're most likely to respond and be in market. And then generative is saying, okay, I understand the full context of what's going on with that company, all the email communications you've sent back and forth, all the browsing behavior the account has exhibited, who are the people in the buying teams. I'm going to use that to help you craft a great ad copy, a great LinkedIn message, a great email that you can send and try to get engagement. So these are the things that have to come together to create a great experience.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I think the one thing that when you're speaking remind me of is AI is as good as the data it's working on, right? Garbage in, garbage out,
That's right.
right? In the whole like predictive, prescriptive, descriptive, and even generative AI, data was like fundamental, and that's what companies like 6sense, etc., are really good at. Is you feed the right data into the right model and generate the right output, because eventually it's all outcome driven, right? You're trying to enhance productivity of reps.
100%. I mean, even the previous markets that I worked in, like if I think about the security companies I worked in that are sitting on so much data that they're seeing from web interactions, app interactions, email interactions. At Proofpoint, I was working on a product called Advanced Threat Protection, and being able to see like a simple URL that is being used for phishing, but being able to see it on a network basis. This is way back when, it's like 15 years ago, and understand, oh, all right, what's going on with this URL? Who's clicking it? Are there malicious attackers at the other end of that URL that are trying to penetrate and take over your machine? Well, all that kind of data, when used and you aggregate it up, there's amazing things that you can do. And so it all starts with the data. Machine learning, of course, can extract the value from it, but data is going to be key for context, for accuracy, for ensuring that you can meet the end objective.
Okay, so moving on, how do you think of like AI strategy in the company today? For example, you always listen to what customers are asking for, right? And they ask for a lot of, especially when you have thousands of customers, there's so many requests all over where you have to cater to. And then you see the future, you have a vision of the future where you feel like, and there's a bit of gut feeling, there's a bit of like market research that's happening, and times are changing so fast right now, right? So how do you make those decisions on, and like I think Henry Ford said, right, at one point in time that nobody is asking for like nobody was asking for cars, they're all asking for faster horses.
Right.
So yeah, could you talk a little bit about the thought process there?
Yeah, I was at a conference not too long ago, and they brought a futurist to talk about, how to think about the future. And he said something very interesting. He said, think about the cars are going to be self-driving. Okay, but what's next? Well, if cars are going to be self-driving, then the roads need to change. The city planning needs to change. If city planning needs to change, then what's going to be the new structure of building, of the pipelines, of plumbing? Okay, that needs to change. So he kind of took us down the 5 step. How do you keep thinking about the future? And so I think when you're building something transformational, you have to put yourself in that futurist mindset and say, okay, how do I see these different paths in which the future can go? When you're thinking about things that are not transformational, but they are productivity capabilities, there are things that are small hacks, small things that actually move the needle forward. I don't think you need to think like a futurist. I think then you just need to look at, okay, what's my customer base saying? At 6sense, we joke, right, that we build some complicated features, some really sophisticated things. But what gets people really excited is, hey, can you do foldering for my account lists, right? And so sometimes it's the simple stuff that actually gets customers to love your product and to use it more. It's organizational. Sometimes you do need to think like a futurist and make some bets. At the end of the day, Steve Blank has the whole lean startup mentality. How do you fail fast, get out of the building, talk to your customers, understand something, do an experiment, do a cheap experiment. Sometimes don't even build, right? Just use mock to see what people will think about a given feature capability. What do they say? As long as you're listening to what they're saying, you might hear, oh, this is interesting, but not very valuable. Whereas something else you might hear, this is pretty amazing. Like I'll use this tomorrow. I'll pay for it. So I think that's kind of the strategy that you use depending on whether it's like the two-way door or the one-way door, right? Like Jeff Bezos talks about some decisions are one-way doors.
Reversible versus irreversible.
Yeah, they're very expensive. And if you're a small company or a startup, you have limited resources. It's those one-way doors that you want to really do a lot more work to make sure that you really want to walk through the door and pick a path.
Awesome. Moving on, like when you evaluate AI products, right? 6sense is a largish company right now, and I'm sure the way they buy products is very different to a small mid-sized company, right? So for the audience out there, could you talk a little bit about, especially for folks who are building an AI, like when a company like 6sense is evaluating products, what are you looking for? Like, and maybe I'll give you some like questions I have in mind. For example, there is some hallucination with AI products today, right? There is also privacy, security concerns that large enterprises have. And there could be other things about trust, transparency of data. It's a black box model, like versus white box model, what's happening behind the scenes. So could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think when I put myself in the buyer's shoes, and I bought software at 6sense and previous companies, when I think about buying software that has components of AI that maybe we can leverage. First starts the application. What's the application? If this is not a life and death application, okay, already like a bunch of stuff, I can say fine, can deal with it. Then it comes to the next layer. You mentioned security and compliance. That's very important. That's very important because we are a B2B enterprise company that is selling to B2B enterprise companies. And our customers demand that from us. We have a lot of reasons to have, DPAs and sub-processor agreements and all kinds of stuff to make sure that we are handling data the right way. Our vendors are handling data the right way that we're giving them and leveraging them for. And so that's very critical. And those are things that you can't compromise on. Things like the black box model. I think a lot of folks have this intellectual curiosity, like I need to know exactly what the model is doing and I need to know every little element of it. And we've dealt with that, at 6sense. And at Proofpoint had a similar challenge. Verisign, we had some similar kind of technology where people wanted to know the details. Like, well, what is the detail going to help you with? Because at the end, you should be concerned with the outcomes. And if that's giving you the right outcomes and it's doing things in a secure fashion, compliant fashion, yeah, I think it's great to satisfy intellectual curiosity, but the product doesn't really need to completely unravel the black box. So that's kind of the way I view it. Is I'm okay with sometimes things being black box, and I expect it because vendors are going to obviously keep some technology close. This is know-how, this is intellectual property. So as long as it makes legitimate sense and I can get validation that they're not doing anything nefarious and using my data the wrong way and their controls, I think that's a great use of technology to buy. Now to evaluate, at least in product, we don't buy any tech without an evaluation. It's the one-way doors. Again, some of the products that we buy in product, they're so sticky. And once they make it into your product pipeline, once they make it inside your product serving the needs of your end user, it's very difficult to replace them and change them. And so there's all the more responsibility as a product organization, as an engineering organization, that we really evaluate well, think about what are we going to put our bets on? Because as a small company, you don't have time to keep doing change management over and over and over again for some of these things.
It's almost as good as you're launching your own feature, right? Because end users are going to see it. You think through every single nuance, detailed PRD, designs are thought through, and you have to be extremely, extremely thoughtful about. So I think buying a product, buying other products also, you probably evaluate it the same way.
We have to, yeah. We have to. It's a responsibility because at the end of the day, that if I have to go replace something we purchase, that's a set of engineers that could have been building new customer features, right? So nothing is free, unfortunately.
Especially engineering resources.
That's right.
Yeah. So for companies, for everything that's happening with the Gen AI landscape today, right? So there are companies that are biting the bullet faster than the others, large and small companies. There's a lot of smaller companies building very quickly. So what's your take on Gen AI adoption in general? Do you feel like every company should weigh it out and decide for themselves whether they want to do it or do you think they should just join the bandwagon and start incorporating AI? So what's the cost of waiting here?
I think the cost of waiting, well, first of all, before I address the cost of waiting, I actually think it is not a 0 or 1 answer, right? It's not like you're either doing Gen AI or not doing Gen AI. I think it's more, you have to look at the objective. What is the outcome you're trying to achieve for your customer? The answer may be very different if you're in B2B sales tech, if you're in security, if you're in healthcare software. The answers could be very different and the applications are very different. And I would broaden it to say beyond Gen AI. I would just say AI in general, right? Like any kind of AI that you use, you have to consider what is the problem you're trying to solve. Is any of these AI technology going to help you solve that problem in a better way? Do you have the data to solve that problem in a better way? If the answer is yes, then absolutely, I think you should use AI in a responsible way to solve those use cases. And I think a lot of times, right now, companies are struggling, the cost benefit analysis, right? And if you just see how the cost has come down, just taking generative AI as an example, right? The cost has dramatically diminished over the last, 2-3 years already. We were doing Gen AI in our email product 3 years ago, and the cost from then to now is dramatically different. And so I think you have to make some bets and say, the cost of being late to this game is that you'll have a later start. You probably will face competition if your competitors and new entrants go down that path. So if you start now and you place a bet that you're buying futures, you're placing the bet that in the future, the cost is going to go down. But if you're able to drive up productivity for your customer, I think it's the difference between the aha moment, making things easier, better, simpler, faster for your customer versus a little bit more frustrating, a little bit more difficult to adopt, a little bit more difficult to like ship a manual along with your product that somebody has to read that nobody reads. So that's the stuff that I think can help you in the near term.
It's also about how fast the future is coming towards you, right? If it's a gradual transition, it's probably okay building incrementally.
Right.
And so it all depends on, I think, your vision of the future and what's going to change. Cool. This was great, Amar. I have a few rapid fire questions. I hope you don't mind me asking, and we'll end
Yeah,
with like
let's do it.
there are not too many, I promise.
All right.
So first question, the AI era. Maybe I think we could probably say from 2021, 2022 onward, we're seeing the generative AI era. I'm calling it an era because unlike crypto, blockchain, and a bunch of other technology trends, this seems like it's more durable, long lasting. So how do you compare this with the cloud era or the .com era? Do you see any similarities or differences?
I think the similarity I see is the frenzy, right? The lot of frenzy, a lot of promise, a lot of potential. I think the differences that I see is there are some very big players who are able to invest, like the cloud players who are sitting on a bunch of cash on their books. And so when I think about what went wrong a little bit in the .com era is everybody was building based on debt, right? They were all, nobody had money. They were going and getting a bunch of VC money and other money and trying to fund all this innovation. And it became like a little bit of a cyclone, right? Incestuous in nature, just a small little group of companies all trying to like make something out of nothing. And I think we saw some great companies come out of it. So I wouldn't knock it. But I think this time would be different. I do think, like you said, I think there's a durable, lasting impact that can come out of this trend because there are companies like the Amazons and the Apples and the Microsofts of the world who are involved in this game, and they're essentially investing in the infrastructure, and they have a lot of cash on their books. They're not relying on debt. So I think that
Sure.
that's the big difference that I see. But yeah, it's the same game. Software, chip makers, everybody's at it.
What's a recent trend in AI that you think is overhyped?
Agents. I think agents is overhyped. I feel like every next person I meet is trying to call every little feature they have an agent, right? Whether it's like it does a simple thing, it interprets a simple thing, it takes one action. That's an agent. I feel like we need to come up with a better definition of what an agent is. Something that's a little bit more sophisticated, does a little bit more than one action. Actually like interprets data, understands the context, takes multiple actions, helps you do work a certain way. I think that's where I see the it's overhyped. So people should question when they hear agents, like, what do you mean by an agent?
So what's your favorite AI application from the ones that you have seen or interacted with so far? I'm sure you're interacting with a bunch of those on a daily basis.
Well, the one I use every day that I can think of is, of course, ChatGPT. And it's not for me. Actually, it's for my son. We do a lot of projects using ChatGPT, a lot of researching, and it's just fun to watch, a 9-year-old kid just get on the interface and use it to conduct research and then land up on all these great articles that are explaining things to him. So that's something like I can really see the power. It reminds me of when iPads came out and the number one user of iPads were children. So I can see the promise of what's happening there. But from a business standpoint, maybe Zoom video, a lot of the like summaries of calls, action items coming from the calls, like it's just improved productivity so much, especially, 6sense. We have people all over the planet working in different time zones and there's so many meetings that you can't be a part of. So being able to consume that in a very easy way without expecting manual note taking and stuff. I mean, that's been, I think, transformational as a user from a productivity standpoint.
ChatGPT is amazing. I've been using, I think most of my search volume now is on ChatGPT versus Google. I don't know if others are seeing the trend too, because the answers are so precise. I tried the same question in Google, ChatGPT, Perplexity, but I mean, the level of depth and answers, you really don't have to like go through like multiple sites to get what you need.
That's right. Although I do tell my son, don't use it for math. Use pen and paper. Use pen and paper.
You have to do it yourself. Probably last question, Amar. So probably, I think you may have covered this with AI agents. What's your take on the future with respect to SaaS applications, right, that we have today versus AI agents? Because even some of the big SaaS companies are talking about AI agents. It may not be like a point solution that you were talking about, but in general, an AI agent that can do like a bunch of tasks. Where do you see the future?
Yeah, I think this is referring to like the debates we're hearing online. Is the end of SaaS? Is SaaS going away? Is the future AI and agents? I kind of think of it as AI agents are almost like co-pilots to SaaS software, they make SaaS better, right? So if I think of like experiences, I think software as a service offers users different experiences on different platforms. You may have a mobile experience, you have a web experience, you have a SMS channel experience, right? And then I think you have capabilities that are configurators. You have workflow agents. You have things that are wizards that take you step by step to achieve an outcome. You have automations that you set up, and there's tons of companies in that space. I feel like AI agents is one more quiver, arrow in the quiver, where you're trying to achieve an end objective and you have to figure out, okay, I want to achieve this end objective on which platform and using what modality. And so I think the long term in my mind is, how do you want to interact with software? AI agents offers one more way to interact. It may become the most popular way, but I don't think it takes away traditional software as a service. Like software still needs to be built. You still need to have a lot of visualizations. People still may want to consume data and do things in different ways that maybe agents aren't able to, 100% help you achieve. So yeah, I think that there's coexistence and AI agents are going to make SaaS better.
It's awesome. Yeah. Amar, thank you so much for being on this podcast. A lot of interesting insights shared, lots of learning on building products from 0 to 200 million plus ARR. And then what do you think the future of AI in products is? Pleasure having you on our show.
No, likewise. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm excited. I think you and I have had some great battle scars over the last 3 years at 6sense and achieving a lot of things. So at some point, maybe we should do another one on pricing and packaging. What do you think, Deepak?
That'll be a whole new session in itself. Yeah, cool.
Fantastic.
All right. Thanks, Amar.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.